Thank you for watching Bull City Rising's coverage of the 2015 City Council elections. My name is Kevin Davis.
And I'm Lisa Sorg.
And we are here at Seeds, the nonprofit in East Durham that works on agricultural and gardening and inner-city youth programs, seedsnc.org, to check out their website. We are here with Steve Schewel, the only incumbent member of City Council running for re-election this term, the at-large races. Welcome, Steve.
Glad to be here with the two anchors of this outstanding program.
So in this, we're going to be covering a number of topics that some have come up in the many forums that have taken place with candidates. Others are new to this discussion. So thank you for watching, and we look forward to for a good discussion here today. Steve, just as a start, you've made it through one term on City Council, completing 4 years this fall. What led you to want to run for 4 more years on council?
It's not about one issue or one particular thing that I want to get done. It's really that I've enjoyed it, and I feel like I've been able to make a contribution. And I think I can continue to do that. I mean, it's there. It's very general. You know, I enjoy the work. Or let me put it another way: 90% of the times I enjoy the work. 10% of the times, 10% of the time it's awful. But that's not a bad ratio. And so I want to do it again. I think I still have a contribution.
Great.
Let me say one other thing about it. I have great colleagues. The council is an unusually, I think, collegial body. And honestly, I think that part of that is the individuals who are there and their temperaments and their way of viewing the job. But also, I think a lot of the credit goes to the mayor. Even when I don't disagree with him, which is, occasionally, it's never personal, and he always moves on to what's next. He doesn't hold one issue, against you later. He and I disagreed recently on some housing stuff. We met this morning on some other housing stuff, and he sets that tone, and I love that tone. And so it makes it easier to run again when the experience is good.
Great. Well, I'm sure we'll have some time to talk about affordable housing in this conversation. Let's start with another controversy related, which is the police headquarters site. In the recent City Council vote, there seemed to be this sense from many of us, and Lisa and myself watching, that no one really seemed to like this site or this project or this building, but it's moving forward. If it's such a bad plan, why is it moving forward?
Okay. Well, let me just say, I think maybe I was in the outlier. I was the outlier there. I actually think it's a good site. I think it's a better site than the Fayette Place site, which was the other major candidate, and I'll tell you why. Because the Fayette site needs to be saved for something else. The Fayette site, owned by the Durham Housing Authority, owned by the Durham Housing Authority has an option, owned by a private landowner, needs to be used for affordable housing and other mixed-use development. That's our key. That's our biggest opportunity. And there were people in the neighborhood who felt the same way. I actually like the site of I think it's a pretty good site. Yes, it's a tight site, but I don't think we ought to have a giant site for the police department. I think it's a big enough site. So then the key issue is, can we activate, if you accept that, then the key issue is, can you activate Main Street? And that way, I think I was also, if not the outlier, I was definitely in the minority, because I liked I was in favor of the DAD and the Preservation Durham Plan, which would have provided the triangle of land in addition to the Carpenter Chevrolet building for private development. The city would have sold it. I was in favor of that. I think there was one of my other colleagues who was in favor of that, but we went down on that. So in my opinion, it's a pretty good site. I don't really share the idea that others have it. It's not a good site. And I think that we didn't do the right thing on the Carpenter Chevrolet. We should have made it available for private development, which we could have recouped some of our costs and so forth. And now the challenge is, can we activate Main Street? I think one of the keys there, in my opinion, at this point now, is public art. I really think that would be an important asset for the building. The architects talked a lot about that at the last work session. They showed us examples of where this had been done successfully. And then the other thing is, one of the other big issues is glazing. They need to adhere to our city code. This is just because this is a police headquarters doesn't mean it can be a giant ugly fortress. It needs to be secure for our officers, but we can do that at the same time we make it a building that is appealing on the street. That is something we need to watch. It didn't happen with that. I love the Health and Human Services building inside. But outside, it's really problematic, and that's what we want to avoid. I think we can. I have good architects. I think they've heard the message loud and clear, and we just have to, hopefully we can do it.
What do you think about the cost overrun?
Well, you know, I've been around school building, you know, when I was on the school board, I guess I kind of come to expect it, unfortunately, you know, that there's so many times when the prediction of that. And I'm always pleased when the city comes in and says, this was done, you know, on time and under budget. And it does happen, but I can't say that I was totally shocked. There's been some good work done to get the overrun down. Originally came in, as you know, they said 81 million. Now we're down to about 71 million. It's still, it ain't chump change, but it will be amortized over 35 or 40 years. And, you know, I don't think it's an unreasonable cost to play. I guess that's the other issue that people have raised is it a good idea to spend this money on the police station? I think it's a reasonable, I think it's the right choice to go ahead and do it. So I'm not sure I'm directly answering your question. I think that some good decisions have been made to try to get rid of some of that cost overrun. And those have been including, for example, not including the police headquarters, things that we didn't need to include in the police headquarters. So, for example, our evidence room, you know, our evidence storage, that doesn't need to be in an expensive per square foot building. It can be where it is in East Durham now in a warehouse there in an excellent location. You know, so those are just some examples.
Okay. One of the other controversial topics, maybe not always controversial to council, but coming up in some of the discussions around this election and many elections, has to do with economic incentives. You know, there's a lot of sort of angst about change and transformation in Durham. We see a lot of high-tech jobs, high-wage jobs, knowledge worker jobs coming into the community. Is this something where you feel the city administration or the council with its votes is incentivizing the only jobs that are available to come into Durham? Or is there more the city could be doing to bring in middle-class, working-class jobs, whether they're manufacturing, service, or what have you?
So I thought where you were first going to go was, should we be offering incentives for these kinds of things? Is that part of the question also?
It's part of it.
Okay.
Are we incentivizing, or should we be incentivizing or incentivizing?
Yeah.
Is the reason we're not getting other kinds of jobs because we're not incentivizing them or because they don't exist?
It's not that they don't. Okay, so good question. And I think this is a tough issue. You know, like I say, I'm pretty clear about the police station. This is much harder because the edges are fuzzier on every one of the decisions. So in terms of thinking sort of broadly about incentives, and I think that we ought to give incentives under certain conditions, and they need to be that they're tax positive, they're tax revenue positive from day one, that none of the money is paid out until they're occupied and paying taxes to the city, that we have a Durham-based business plan, we have a Durham-based employment plan, and that they are pledged to those things. We also have some other things. They have to participate in the Summer Works Youth Internship. And now we've added post-residence in, the debacle of the residence in, that they have to, there has to be a certification that they have before they can take an incentive that there are no unsettled issues with unpaid workers, which we've had. So all that's good. And I think that we have a pretty good system of protecting our taxpayers and our residents through this. But then the question becomes, who gets that? And we used to say, well, it's, you know, we need to develop downtown. And then for a while, we need a certain amount of hotels to support the convention center. And, you know, so there have been various targets, and those targets have been hit pretty much. So now is it a transformative project? And is it a transformative project, and what else would happen? Or does it have some historic preservation value? Chesterfield. Or is it preventing some other kind of development that we don't want? So I think that was part of what was going on with the Longfellow. You know, Longfellow comes in, they want an incentive, they are going to have, if all works as they say they will, and we wouldn't pay out the incentive until it did, they're going to have a tremendous number of amazing, well-paying jobs, and it's going to be a thoughtful, well-done development. And then what they say to us is, and if we aren't able to get this, you know, we're going to have two Hampton Inns and, IHOP or whatever.
And you're talking about the track
Developers.
near the Durham Center Park.
The Durham
I'm
ID
talking-
section.
The Durham ID.
Yeah, the Durham ID, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
the
Yes,
Innovation
I'm sorry.
District.
Exactly. I'm talking about the Innovation District. So, And I think that we have to weigh what they say and try to decide how accurate it is. Do we really believe it? And how, because it's developers talking, and they have their own self-interest. I don't blame them, but that's something we have to evaluate. And then secondly, so would they do the deal anyway without the incentive? Is there competition for this deal? Other people are trying to get it. And then we also have to evaluate, if we didn't do it, then the other kind of development did come there. Is that okay or is it not okay? So we're constantly evaluating these various factors. We haven't done very many. I've been on council for 4 years. I think we've done, including the two little teeny ones we did, one was $70,000, one was $50,000 this was last 2 nights ago, or a few days ago. Including those, I think we've done 14 since I've been on council. Some of them are very small, some of them are quite a bit larger, where we will give a potential, a builder, a potential developer, $5 million in tax relief, say, over a 10-year period. Again, it's still tax positive to the taxpayer from day one, but they don't have to pay as much taxes. When you look at this really broadly, it's hard not to think about what would have happened if we hadn't incentivized American tobacco. I just think that it's not, there are people who say we shouldn't be giving them. I think what we ought to be doing is giving them carefully. Now, in response to the second part of the question, which is, how about the jobs? We all want two kinds of jobs. We all want the really fabulous jobs that are paying a whole lot of money and they're high tech, and we want our folks to be able to get them, Durham people to be able to get them. So let me address that in a second. But in the first part of the question was, what about the jobs that are maybe not for people who are in this able to get these high tech jobs? That we're graduating a lot of people from Durham's high schools who are not going to go to college, but who might want a certification to be able to do this work. It's not that I think those jobs aren't available. I just think that they're a lot harder to get.
But we were talking with some other candidates about the former Rolling Hills and Lofts, the South Side,
Sure.
South Side, and then that led me to think about the Fayetteville Street corridor.
Uh-huh.
And it feels very left behind right now.
Mm-hmm.
Lots of boarded up buildings. There was a fire. There's an old dry cleaners that had some environmental problems.
Yes.
So working with Central, of course, because it's the gateway to Central. And, I know Cora Cole McFadden's very much an advocate for Central. And I think about, if I'm taking my child to Central for the first time and I'm having to drive through that, how do I feel?
Yeah.
So what can the city do with the neighborhood? I mean, what's the plan to reinvigorate that corridor?
Yeah. Great question. I would say right now, I wouldn't say there's a plan. There has been a plan. There's been a plan for the Fayetteville Street corridor. And it's a number of years old before I ever got on the council, so at least 5 years old. But I think longer than that. And it really has never been actualized for a couple of different reasons. But I think that there is more promise now for a couple of reasons. One is the fact that we do have the South Side. We're about to go into phase 2 of the South Side Lofts, the rental. There's now, because of the city-initiated development on both sides of Roxborough, south side, east, and west, with the rental and the home ownership portion. There is a lot of, it has done the one of the things it's done, it started much more revitalization there. And so that is becoming a more prosperous area. That has its downsides, which we'll, I'm sure, address. Okay. So, so on the other hand, Kevin Dick from our Office of Economic and Workforce Development has been talking to us about a Fayetteville Street corridor plan. And so, what should we be doing there? And he has some ideas about it, and I'm sure they'll be coming forward to us. Because, the thrust of your question is absolutely right. We have got to get the prosperity of downtown across 147 to the south. That's imperative. And not just for Central, but for that whole area. And I think that we need to be paying attention to that. And as you say, despite the unhappy history with the Hesters in terms of previous development, they are the ones who are there, and we need to figure out a way to make it work.
Great.
So Mayor Bell has announced this is going to be his last election. And that 2 years from now, for I think 30% of the time that Durham's been a city, we've had Mayor Bell in elected office. That won't be the case in 2 years. Durham Magazine ran the, I can't remember if it was Citizen Steve or Citizen Schewel cover about you a couple of years ago, and there's been talk widely surrounding you as having interest in the mayoral position. Is it your intent to run 2 years from now for mayor? Or if you haven't made up your mind on that decision, when do you expect you would make up your mind on that decision?
Well, so first of all, I have supported Bill Bell for 40 years. I worked on his 1974, maybe 72 campaigns. I have, and I think he's been a tremendous mayor. He was great on the county commission. When Bill was running against Thomas Stith, I had fundraising for him. I mean, I really support him, and having seen him up close in the last 4 years, I even have more respect for him. He's a great mayor. Don't agree with everything he says, but he really does a great job. So if he changes his mind, I'm for him. But if Bill doesn't run, I am planning to take a shot at it. Yeah, definitely. I'd like to have the opportunity to do it. My grandmother had a saying, which is, there's many a slip twixt cup and lip. And who knows what will happen in the next 2 years. But if Bill doesn't run, I would love to have the opportunity. Of course, there's no guarantee I would win at all, but I would take a shot at it.
So speaking about, back to this election, at the Duke Forum last week, where only you and Charlie Reese and Jillian Johnson were present, I know a lot of the joking on a more informal panel there was, we've got the slate up here, and when the Duke Chronicle or the Duke Student said, it seems like all three of you are running together, the answer was sort of, yes, we really are. So in a sense, as a slate running, or a set of fellow endorsees, what are the areas where you might disagree with Charlie or Jillian, or even with the PA more broadly? What are the areas that set you apart from what's otherwise a pretty strong, progressive slate running for office?
I hear, well, for example, I'll give you one example. Jillian says that we should, and she said consistently that we shouldn't be spending the money on the police department, or at least we should be looking at doing something else. And I don't agree with that. I think that we've made the right decision. I mean, that would be one example. And then there's points of emphasis. Charlie really emphasizes the fact that we've had a spike in violent crime. And he says, we've had a 13.5% spike in violent crime over the last 6 months. And I guess, in a different, I haven't really talked to him about this, but I will. The long-term trend is like this in Durham. Yeah, we have. But the long-term trend also has 13.5% spikes in it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. And so I think we just have to think more broadly about that. What is our real crime trend? We hope it could become something that starts going up, and we have to prevent that. So it's not that I'm against what he's saying. I just think it would be a different emphasis, mm-hmm. because I don't know that it's that helpful to say that. Mm-hmm. It scares people maybe, and I don't think we need to be. We need to be doing smart things about crime, but in general, I do. Yeah, I would say that I don't have any. I don't have any really of. It's interesting because with everybody running, I disagree with them on some things, but there's a lot of agreement among the group. You all have heard. It's Durham. And Leah, my wife consistently, who lobbies in the legislature on criminal justice issues, against the death penalty, for alternatives to prison, and for drug treatment, and for mental health services. She says, I love to drive back home to Durham every day because we don't have to fight any of that stuff. There are not a bunch of right-wingers here who are trying to split the governing power with us, or can. They would like to. So there is a consensus in Durham that is good. There are some differences on issues, but that's what they are.
So to that point about the consensus, there's this concept in biology you're probably familiar with, of the monoculture, where if an organism doesn't have enough diversity within it, it becomes susceptible to disease. Computers, working in IT, we had the same fear 15 years ago. Everything was on Windows, viruses would propagate quickly. In a community that is as united in so many ways around progressive causes, where we may have a council that's a really strong progressive majority on every issue, are there any risks? And again, council or community, about being so alike in so many ways.
It's funny because when we're up there, it doesn't feel like, I mean, when I'm sitting there with Bill and Diane and Don and Eddie and Cora, it actually doesn't feel like, it feels like, here's what it feels like. It feels like we're really good colleagues, but that we disagree a lot. So it doesn't feel like a monoculture. I'd be interested to know what you all think, you know, from the outside, because you all are very close observers of the process. But there's a lot of debate up there. And I mean, we are a progressive group now. I mean, there's no question. If you looked around the state of North Carolina, well, what are the most progressive city councils? I guarantee you Durham would be at the top of the list. And so, and yet, you know, there are many things that we debate and differ over. And so it doesn't feel like a monoculture to me, but maybe it's more of a, but since I'm inside it, I may not be recognizing it. Let me put it like that.
Well, there was some debate on Monday night about removing the historic designation for that 1 acre at West Village parking lot.
Yeah.
And I thought that was an interesting, I mean, the world didn't stop spinning.
Right.
But I thought it was an interesting exchange of ideas about the
Right.
pros and cons of that. And,
Yeah.
and there was some dissent about it.
Yeah.
Even though it ended up being a 7-0 vote,
Right.
there was some dissent
Exactly.
in getting there.
Right, like I didn't get what I wanted. I wanted them to have, at least, we couldn't require them to pay back taxes for more than 3 years, pay us back for the taxes if they got abated. But I wanted us to ask them, but the rest of the council didn't want us to ask them. I think maybe Diane did. But it was clear that wasn't going to happen. But that's the kind of thing where, I mean, there's tons of that. And you see the work session, Lisa, you're there a lot. I mean, there are, you know, the police headquarters is another good example. What we've just gone through with Jackson Street with the housing, the debate over housing. But it happens with a million little things that are almost like you're talking about. That's a typical, and you know, I think I feel like I have really thoughtful colleagues. We differ on things, but I will sort of cop to being, yes, we are in this monoculture, in a sense, political monoculture, relatively, and I'm inside it, and maybe I can't see the disadvantages of it.
Great.
It's 3:35. You have to be somewhere at 4, did you
I
say?
have to leave it for.
You have to leave at 4, okay. Well, we have someone coming in at 4, I just wanted to.
Yeah,
okay.
sure.
So, I have a couple more questions.
Yeah. Well, 3, 2, 1. So this is a question about green space inside the loop.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of talk about
Yes.
building housing and groceries and all this stuff that's going to
Yes.
happen downtown. But there is a downtown open space plan.
Yes.
Wow, and it's my understanding that's really recommendations. It's not the law, but it's a guidance document. So I think the concern for some folks is it's not just concrete space, but green space. How do you preserve that? And because it's really tight with all these
Yes.
development pressures and all these opportunities, really, because
Yes.
downtown needs a lot of things.
Yeah.
Where does green space fall in that hierarchy?
I'm glad you asked. So the campaign forums tend to be reduced to about 3 issues. You know, what are the 3 most important issues they ask? Well, there's policing, you know, they usually ask the 2, policing and affordable housing. And I try to surface a third, which this is sort of a part of, which I can talk about more broadly if you want me to. But the main thing I would say is this. That's an example of something really important that does not get asked about. And here's what I think about that. I want to just be clear. We did not just receive the downtown green space plan, open space plan. We adopted it. And that was an issue. The administrator asked us to receive it. But, you know, and sometimes when you're in a campaign, you have to kind of take credit for things that you did. So I pushed really hard for us to adopt it. And we did adopt it. We adopted it unanimously. That is an adopted plan. Now, that doesn't mean it's law in the sense that, you know, you have to adhere to every detail of it, but it's more than just we got it. We approved it and we liked it, right? So I think the real threat to that plan is on the eastern end of the loop, where there is a proposal where the open space plan has a wonderful, there would have to be significant changes in the routing of the roads, which everybody wants. But for there to be a really nice green space over there to the east of City Hall. It's a great plan, but there are people who, the folks who are trying to redo the loop, good for them, the loop needs to be redone, have got, they've got buildings there in that space.
You're talking about Bob Chapman.
I'm talking about Bob and the folks who are redoing the loop.
Yeah.
Who want to redo the loop.
Yeah.
So the great thing is they're pushing to redo the loop, and we need advocates for that. That's awesome. And I give Bob and his group full marks for getting everybody together and let's help us think about it. Let's help us think about how to do it less expensive than we talk about doing it. But I am concerned, and I've told Bob this, and I've told our city planners this, and I've told Downtown Durham Inc. this, just me, it's not anybody but me, I'm just speaking for myself. We need to preserve that open space downtown that's to the east of City Hall. I really feel very strongly about it. You know, this is not on our agenda right now because this is some years away, but I just think we need to keep our eye on that ball. So that's the one space I think. I'll say the other thing I'll say is I do try to seize opportunities when they come up. So for example, when in the Durham ID district, Longfellow was proposing, they had some plan and has a lots worth of green space in their plan. And so what I pushed for there was I want that this be publicly accessible. I don't want all of our green space downtown or in town to be privatized. And so the developers did agree to make that publicly accessible. It will effectively act like a park, except they'll maintain it. So and I think we've got the best of both worlds there. So I think we have to seize opportunities when they come to us to make sure that we're getting as much green as we can get. I will say this is part of a larger issue in my mind, and this is the other issue I've been trying to surface as part of the campaign. Durham is prospering, and as we prosper, we're entering a kind of golden age. I really believe we are. If the tobacco era was our gilded age, this can be something very different. And but it won't be different depending upon what we do. So that includes the issues of affordable housing and policing, but it also includes something else I think really important, which is investing. We need to invest in all the wonderful quality of life things that we're going to want here for the next 100 years. Parks, sidewalks where we're woefully inadequate, bike lanes where we're doing much better. We're really doing much better than some of our neighbors, interestingly. And I'm proud of our transportation department for pushing ahead. Ball fields. There are hundreds of Latino soccer players who can't find a place to play, and many other people who are not Latino who are looking for ball fields. When we had to shut down Twin Lakes to repair it, the Hispanic League went out of business because they couldn't even get on that one field, basically. It's not okay. We are way behind other places. So parks, ball fields, sidewalks, bike lanes, bicycle infrastructure, the tree canopy. The tree canopy, we need to think about that as infrastructure, and we need to invest in it. It can't just be all volunteers. There's a role for volunteers, but we need to invest. And the Environmental Affairs Board came back with an initial report that says we need 1,650 new trees a year just to replace the dying canopy. All these willow oaks are going to be dying in the next 10 years, just on public land. So we got to figure out how to do that. And then the other huge one is light rail. We have got to. I am a huge believer in the light rail. I totally favor it. I understand the objections of certain people to certain aspects of it, Downing Creek and the Romford-Farrington Road. I will say, though, that I believe very much that those objections are ones that can be overcome with some good planning and some good planning work, and we have the years to do it. But if we're gonna not have a region that is totally congested and air polluted, and people are going to not be able to move around on a road, we got to start building a light rail system. We got to draw Raleigh into it through commuter rail, and this will just be the backbone. This will be a 17-mile backbone of a whole system of buses and rail. It's a great start, and we need to do it. So that's what I'm trying to get people to think about is as another way of thinking about our prosperity. Is when we are prosperous, let's invest.
So to that point, Steve, I look back on the last 25 years in Durham as a series of pivotal, unpopular decisions. The Durham Bowls Athletic Park, the ATC investment, and the DPAC, maybe less unpopular than some. What's that next unpopular? Well, that was like baseball right there. So, what's the next unpopular decision that we need to make?
Police headquarters.
Really? You think it's at that significant level?
I think that the police headquarters is unpopular with a lot of people. I think it's the right thing to do. So that's the next one, but that's pretty big. I guess that's not the next one in a way because it's been made, right? Yeah, so, yeah, I guess that the light rail is the other one that's in that category, and we're about to make that decision.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, of course, that's much bigger than the police headquarters. This is a $1.6 to $1.8 billion project. It's going to affect hundreds of thousands of people over, or millions of people over years.
Sure.
And I think that it has, in the last few months, opposition to it has really revved up from a couple of quarters. I understand. I don't think that they're seeing the full advantages to themselves.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the people at Downing Creek, they want a better way to get out of their neighborhood. I get it, but they're also getting, and we need to do that. But at the same time, they're going to have a rail station less than a quarter of a mile walking distance from where they live.
Yeah.
Bring it to my neighborhood. You know, that's what I feel. But that's a decision that I think is unpopular in some circles, and we need to do it. I could probably come up with some other unpopular ones.
So I have to say, I've been a huge supporter of light rail. You know, posted stories about this.
Yes,
very much
and
support.
you've written some great stuff.
And Nick Ford, who's one of the leading opponents of it, I thought had a very appropriate comment on Lisa's story earlier this week. He pointed out, Lisa's reporting that the light rail will go over the alveolar trail and be elevated along the golf course. And he raised the point, we're going to avoid a golf course and a walking trail, but we're not doing avoiding that grade crossing in our neighborhood.
Yeah.
Which I thought was actually a fairly interesting argument. There is a perception among many South Durhamites, and even when I talk to Patrick McDonough and others at Go Triangle, that there seem to be a lot of things focused in that area. My takeaway from some of those conversations was there seemed to be this sort of effort to both avoid alienating Chapel Hill by changing the Meadowmont route, but also ensuring the Woodmont station could remain where it is to allow development for Chapel Hill, thus necessitating the light rail on the south side of 54 rather than going on the north side. Do you feel that that that's a real issue? And I hate to exacerbate a Durham Chapel Hill divide when there are so many, but are we getting a fair shake of this?
I mean, let me, on this one, and I don't do this very often, but let me just plead innocence in the sense that I wasn't around when those decisions were made, and I'm not really very informed about them. I mean, those decisions were made before I ever got on council, and I just am not, I don't know. I don't really know enough. But on your general question, I mean, my understanding, for example, to talk about some specifics, my understanding about the Meadowmont station is not so much that it was something Chapel Hill didn't want, it was something that the Army Corps didn't want us to, that you could go through Meadowmont, they would allow you to go through Meadowmont if you would take the route way, way up here and slow way, way down and make it not as good a route. So it was really the Army Corps, is my understanding from Go Triangle, that drove that decision. Yes, there are people in Meadowmont who were opposed to it, but I do believe not ours, but the Chapel Hill elected officials would have been fine to. They wanted to go through Meadowmont. That's my understanding. But that whole history, in a way, is not even worth debating. I think that the larger question we're asking is should be in the future, are those folks down there getting a fair deal on whatever it is that's happening? And I know that and I'm friends with lots of them, and I know that they feel that. This is new to me. I had never heard this before it came up with a light rail. So it's not something I've dealt with or been familiar with, but I hear it, and I will think about it as these issues come up in the future. It had never really surfaced to me at all. I was really surprised to hear that there are a bunch of Durham people who felt like they were getting a lot of bad stuff pushed on them from Chapel Hill. I heard it in the last few months. I get it. I'll think about it, but I don't know much about it.
Fair answer. With that, Stephen, any questions we haven't asked you, things you want to make sure that voters hear in this conversation, or other things you want to make sure that they get on the record?
There are millions. Anything else I really want to talk about? I mean, you guys have asked a lot of great questions. I think, it's, can't think of anything specifically that I really want to talk about. It's except for the usual platitudes. It's a privilege to serve. Hope I get reelected.
Great. Steve Schewel, thank you for the time.
Thanks, Kevin. Appreciate it.
Much appreciated.
Thanks, Lisa.
Thank you, Steve.